It's funny how these things start. We were just driving to lunch one Saturday, and I was on one of my tangents. This time it was about Camus and postmodernism. I was getting into epistemology, the study of how we know what we know, which is usually my excuse to be completely unbearable at parties.
And that's when my wife just cut right through all of it. She asked a question that on the surface sounds so simple, but you know the kind that reveals the one brick you didn't realize your whole argument was resting on. She just said, postmodernism is post what? What exactly is modernity? And I just stopped. It hit me. I'd spent so much time talking about the post, the after, the beyond. I could give you the names, the dates, all the buzzwords, reason, progress, mastery, the whole shebang. But I realized, right there in the car, that I had never really truly pinned down the thing itself. It's a bit like you can spend a lifetime going to funerals, but nobody ever stops you to ask for a definition of life.
So I sat there for a second, completely caught. And then an idea came to me, something I hadn't really formulated before. I said, modernity, it's an unhappy marriage between empiricism and rationalism. It's Francis Bacon and René Descartes forced to live in the same house. They can't stand each other, they're always fighting over how to run things, but they can't get a divorce. And if you're looking for the central, load-bearing tension that holds up the last 500 years of history, well, you could do a lot worse than that.
So, let's meet the partners in this dysfunctional union. On one side, you've got empiricism, championed by Francis Bacon. The idea here is that all real knowledge starts with observation. You look, you measure, you test. Its greatest virtue is its humility. It doesn't assume anything. But its greatest vice? Well, it can gather mountains of data and not be able to explain any of it. Then you have the other partner, rationalism, with Descartes as its icon. For the rationalist, knowledge starts from first principles, these pure, self-evident truths. From there, you build everything with logic. Its virtue is its incredible rigor. Its vice, though, is that it's perfectly capable of building these magnificent, flawless, logical structures that turn out to be completely and utterly wrong.
Now, you have to understand, this wasn't the first great intellectual marriage. The world that modernity replaced, medieval Christendom, it had its own power couple. That was a union between the philosophy of Aristotle and the theology of St. Augustine, with Thomas Aquinas playing the marriage broker. They called it scholasticism. It held things together for about 300 years, and then it just fell apart. Modernity was born from the ashes of that divorce, and it remarried in a hurry. As Shakespeare put it so perfectly, the funeral baked meats did coldly furnish forth the marriage tables.
If you want to know what that hasty remarriage feels like, from inside the house, it feels like Hamlet. The old king is dead, the old authority is gone, and before anyone can even process it, a new regime, a new way of being is installed. There's no time to mourn, no time to understand the loss. That speed, that seamless, unsettling transition, that's the signature of modernity.
And Hamlet, the play, shows you the fracture perfectly. See, Hamlet comes home from Wittenberg, which, not coincidentally, is Martin Luther's hometown, and he's like an infection vector for this brand new way of knowing. He's paralyzed by a very Cartesian doubt. A ghost told him his uncle is a murderer, but how can he know it's true? So what does he do? He devises a Baconian experiment. He puts on a play. The play's the thing, wherein I'll catch the conscience of the king. He forms a hypothesis, he runs a test, and he observes the result. And it works. He gets his data. Claudius is guilty. He knows. And yet he still can't act. And that's the discovery. His new method gives him knowledge, but it doesn't give him a warrant to act. It tells him what is, but not what he ought to do.
You know, if this tension between empiricism and rationalism had stayed productive, if it had been a healthy debate, modernity might have worked out just fine. But that's not what happened. What happened was something pathological. Something you see in any toxic relationship, really. The partners started to pick up each other's worst habits.
It was like a cross-infection of ideas. Empiricism, which was supposed to be humble and open, it caught rationalism's fever for dogmatic certainty. It started acting like its observations were the final word, a new kind of doctrine. And at the same time, rationalism caught empiricism's numbness, its instrumental indifference. It stopped caring if its grand theories were actually true and only asked if they worked. Did they organize society? Did they provide control?
And when you combine these two corrupted forms, well, the result is absolutely catastrophic. You get a system that starts with some unquestionable rationalist doctrine, a racial theory, an economic theory, and then uses every empirical tool it can find to enforce it.
Modern totalitarianism is that combination. It's structural rationalism armed with Baconian tools. It doesn't just believe a dogma, it administers it with scientific efficiency, with spreadsheets, with industrial technique.
I mean, look at the Soviet Union. Scientific socialism wasn't just a catchy phrase. It was a claim about method. But the second you say you've discovered the unchangeable laws of history, you've left Bacon behind and you're fully in Descartes' camp. The system seals itself off from reality. When evidence comes along that contradicts the theory, it's not the theory that's wrong, it's the evidence or the people who produced it. Think of Lysenkoism. The party line contradicted Mendelian genetics, so genetics had to go. Soviet agriculture was devastated. But did the system see that as proof that Lysenko was wrong? No. It saw it as proof that the saboteurs hadn't been rooted out yet.
Nazi Germany is the same structure, just with a different myth at its core. It begins with the axiom of racial supremacy, and then it marshals the entire awesome power of modern bureaucracy to serve that axiom. The barbarism itself isn't what makes it uniquely modern. It's the industrialization of that barbarism. As I wrote in the essay, the Holocaust is not myth alone. It is myth with a spreadsheet. It's myth with train schedules, with meticulous records, with optimized logistics and engineered gas chambers. The paperwork was always in order.
The Second World War, it wasn't a fight between empiricism and rationalism. It was their final, awful consummation. It was the moment both partners, in their corrupted forms, worked together in perfect harmony on a project of total destruction. And after the dust settled, after Auschwitz and Hiroshima, we had to look at what this marriage had produced. We had to name the children.
And as I see it, there were two. The first was the moral child, which we can call humanism. This was the beautiful idea, the claim that all our knowledge, all our power, was ultimately in the service of human dignity. The second child was the operational one, technological progress. This was just the raw, neutral, amoral capacity to do more, build bigger, no more. An engine running for its own sake. After 1945, only one of those children really survived. Technological progress, of course, came out stronger than ever. It could claim to be neutral, just a tool, but humanism? It had nowhere to hide. The very civilization that preached human dignity had just proven with terrifying efficiency that it could set that principle aside entirely, and the machinery of the state wouldn't miss a beat. The machine didn't need a soul to run. Humanism didn't die because someone refuted it. It died because it turned out to be optional.
So that's the crisis. The modern machine generates power much, much faster than it can generate a justification for using it. And for decades, this crisis just sat there, waiting. It was waiting for an artist to come along and stage the whole argument so clearly that we couldn't ignore it anymore. And someone did. Tom Stoppard. In his masterpiece, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead.
What Stoppard does is brilliant. He takes these two minor, forgotten characters from Hamlet, and he puts them right at the center of the story. And they only have two tools to figure out what's happening to them. Rosencrantz is the pure empiricist. He's just observing. And in the course of the play, he accidentally rediscovers basic physics, water displacement, momentum, aerodynamics. He's a one-man scientific revolution. Guildenstern, on the other hand, is the pure rationalist. He's constantly building these elaborate logical arguments, syllogisms, that are perfectly coherent but completely useless.
And here is the genius of the play. It shows you both halves of modernity, each working perfectly on its own. Rosencrantz has the data, Guildenstern has the logical framework. But the connection between them is broken. They can't hand anything off to one another. There's no room in Guildenstern's neat logical world for Rosencrantz's messy observations. The tragedy isn't that their tools are broken. The tragedy is that the handoff is impossible.
But Stoppard's play has another layer, a deeper cut. Because as we're sitting there in the audience, we understand what's going on. We see what Rosencrantz and Guildenstern can't. We know their characters in Hamlet. We recognize the laws of physics as they discover them. We feel superior, maybe. But the real question is, why? Why do we get it when they don't?
And the answer is actually quite simple and quite humbling. The reason we understand is that we're cheating. We are cheating because we have two crucial scaffolds that the characters lack. First, we have the Shakespeare frame. We already know the plot of Hamlet. We know their fate. Second, we have the Newtonian frame, centuries of physics that give context to Rosencrantz's discoveries. We aren't any smarter than they are. We simply have, as I put it in the essay, access to structures of meaning that are invisible to us precisely because we did not build them. Knowledge doesn't just come from method, it requires a frame. And you never see the frame until it starts to crack.
And that finally brings us back to my wife's question. What is postmodernism? It's not a solution. It's not an escape. Postmodernism is simply the moment modernity caught a glimpse of itself in the mirror and recognized its own reflection. It's the recognition that we are generating knowledge without foundation, power without warrant, and technique without any ultimate justification.
Now, how people reacted to seeing that reflection? Well, that splits in two. You have the German thinkers, like Theodor Adorno, who saw it with utter horror. For him, this was a structural trap inside of thought itself, and there was no clean way out. But then you have the French post-structuralists, people like Foucault and Derrida. They took Adorno's epistemological terror and translated it into a problem of language and power. They were more playful. If it's just about discourse, well, you can critique it, you can subvert it, you can play with it. But if the problem is in the very structure of knowledge, well, then your critique is just another symptom of the disease.
Postmodernism diagnoses the illness, but it has given up on finding a cure. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. The larger play of history just continues without them. The lights come up, and we all go home. And this brings me to one last thought, a postscript. There was one person who saw all of this coming. The failing marriage, the death of our justifications. He saw it 60 years before anyone else, writing from a small rented room in the Swiss Alps. He's in the postscript for one simple reason. By his sheer intellectual gravity, Friedrich Nietzsche hijacks any essay he enters.